Hello, fellow Americans. Today is Sunday, June 13th, day 55 of Obama's oil disaster. I'm Al Reason, known as the voice of reason or the corner guy. The corner guy because I stand on a corner 4 nights a week trying to get Americans to think about where we're heading with this government. Yesterday we saw the images of an Alabama beach with a thin layer of oil. No skimmers, no people cleaning the oil, no booms. Just bathers who after 10 minutes said it was irritating their throat and left. This is destroying the economy of the Gulf area, from Pensacola all the way over to New Orleans, possibly further south into Florida later on. We're looking at drilling 2 relief wells, which is what Mexico had to do in 1979 when they had their blowout. But the indication that I saw was that nothing that they did worked. The same type of attempts that BP made, no lessons learned there apparently. From June 3rd, 1979 straight through March 23rd, 2008 was the time frame it took before they could relieve the pressure and actually stop and cap the well. It was reported that 3 days after the oil line failure, the Dutch offered skimmers. Now, whether they were useful in the Gulf, I don't know. The Coast Guard has indicated that they may not be. FNC has reported that the equipment on these skimmers are being removed and placed on American ships to conform to the Jones Act. But what I don't understand, the Jones Act, which is to protect our maritime forces, private shipping, etc., passed in 1920, that this law has not been wavered. It was wavered by Bush 2 days after Katrina, when the indication was that there was insufficient ports, shipping, whatever, that influenced the administration to suspend it. This administration, after 55 days, has not suspended the Jones Act. We cannot use foreign support vessels in the cleanup. I don't know whether they would operate properly, but I would certainly give it a try. I'd give anything a try. We hear environmental requirements wouldn't allow Governor Jindal to build the sand dunes to place them in front of the wetlands. It's unfortunate that the governor did not go ahead and just do it, assuming that he had the finances, the money to back it up, and then ask for forgiveness later on. I cannot believe that any environmental damage done by building the sand dunes can be worse than what the oil is. But maybe the government believed, as the safety report, the study that was done by BP has reported, that it would never reach the shores. Well, we know it has. We've seen pictures. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration pre-approved, under certain conditions which were met the first couple of days after the oil disaster, to burn the oil. My understanding from the reports I read is they needed booms to be able to concentrate the oil. Unfortunately, the booms were not available. This was a pre-approved method to getting rid of the oil. It did not have to go through a review or anything else. In 1994, they had reviewed it and determined this was the way to go if the wind was out to the Gulf rather than inland. But it wasn't done. I don't know if it was for environmental reasons or not, but definitely was not done. I do not understand, and no one has explained it to me via public television or public reports. The BOP, or the blowout protection valve, which is used to stop what we saw in the old movies, the oil gusher with the spouting out of the oil well covering the people. So the BOP valve is used to prevent that. Obviously, we want to prevent that at sea. According to reports I read, it had not been inspected by the government since 2005. Now, normally, industry procedures are to have approved procedures approved by government regulatory agencies that says you will do certain inspections, certain tests, etc. over a period of time. That's the way it's done in the nuclear industry and other areas that I'm familiar with. Of course, those records may have been destroyed when the oil rig sank, in the fire, of course, before that. But why didn't the government do inspections and certifications of that valve, do test actuations of that valve, although that would have interrupted some flow when it was in use, but still done testing of that valve. So that particular valve supposedly was not tested or not inspected since 2005. It also did not have all the backups that are presently available. Now, to have all these backups is an additional $500,000 according to the report that I read. The backups are an electrical signal from the surface through a cable, an acoustical signal from the surface based on a modulated encoded pulse of sound transmitted by an underwater transducer, a manual operation probably by a submersible. It is also possible to trigger the closing of a BOP automatically based on excessive pressure or excessive flow. In the United States, offshore operators are allowed to have BOPs using only the electrical actuation from the report I read. Again, I'm reading this from reports that supposedly are professionally written, the information gleaned, and then transmitted to the public. Whether that is correct, I don't know. But it bothers me that federal regulations aren't stringent enough. Now, $500,000 more for a valve with all these backups is certainly a large amount of money. I agree. But things have to be weighed. The environmental damage that is being done now possibly could have been stopped had we had a different valve and BOP valve. My experience has shown, though, that valves, at least in power plants, can be made fail-safe. They have a mechanical spring that fully closes the valve, an automatic actuation, not something from the surface. That would be a backup. But you would have a safeguard, the safeguard of an automatic actuation of a valve if it loses its signal. This doesn't appear to be a method that's used with BOP valves. I don't know why. Could it be incorporated? Don't know. In my opinion, though, if it can, it should be. Loss of signal, loss of capacity. To close the valve, it automatically closes. Fail-safe. Now we have a 6-month moratorium on drilling. The 7 experts have said that they never saw that recommendation, and they actually opposed it. Why the White House released information that may be wrong, at least the experts say it's wrong, when it could be verified, is beyond my understanding. The only thing that I can think of is incompetence. Just total incompetence. Now, the president wants BOP to pay all the salaries for all the workers that will be laid off because of the moratorium. I do not understand that logic. I'm not a fan of I said BOP, I meant BP. I'm not a fan of BP. But if the government takes an action that's not necessarily required, why should the company have to pay for the salaries of those who are impacted by the government's decision? That is something the government should have weighed beforehand. I certainly do not understand the logic behind that. They're also talking about retroactively increasing the cap. I think it's $75 million that was placed in effect during the Clinton administration. That's unconstitutional. You can't go back after the fact and change the rules. We've seen this with AIG before, with the bonuses. There is very little that I see on the media that really goes back and compares and contrasts the decisions that are made based on what has gone before. So I'm going to try to do that a little bit. Until then, take care and be safe.